Systemic oppression, the intentional disadvantaging of groups of people based on their identity, gender, race, class, sexual orientation, language, etc., while advantaging members of the dominant group. Black youth are suffering from the effects of systemic oppression. They are experiencing a syndemic of injustice. A syndemic is a systematic confluence of multiple traumas on black people based on structural and institutional discrimination and stigmatization. What distinguishes this phenomenon as a syndemic is the mutually reinforcing interactions of the conditions which impact black people as a collective. A race discrimination system comprised of feedback relationships between residential segregation, education, employment, community, resources, socioeconomic status, and healthcare. For black youth, exposure to this syndemic of injustice results in them being more likely to have experienced 3 or more adverse childhood experiences compared to their white and Latino peers. The effects of these experiences can have negative long-term impact on health and well-being of countless populations of black youth. Systemic racism and discrimination are forms of systemic oppression found to be root causes of poverty and hunger in the United States. Systemic racism is a form of violence that places or keeps people of color in conditions of hunger and poverty throughout their structural withholding of resources and opportunities, hypersurveillance and unjust incarceration inflicted on radicalized individuals and communities.
5 major problems that affect Black America. 5.
What are they?
Mass incarceration, miseducation, gentrification, access to wealth, and police genocide. They're all equally relevant.
America must see that no other ethnic group has been a slave on American soil. America freed the slaves in 1863 through the Emancipation Proclamation of Abraham Lincoln, but gave the slaves no land or nothing in reality, and as a matter of fact, to get started on. It's
been like survival of the fittest for black people, generation after generation after generation. So if his dad is locked up, more than likely his grandfather was locked up. Yeah. Right. And his grandfather might have been locked up. And then we got to ask, well, what were they locked up for? Were they criminal masterminds from birth? Or were they locked up on trumped up drug charges? Because we know, a white man and a black man can get the same kind of charge and then get different time spans for the same crime. So, like, you ask, is it the father or is it society? Well, it's a combination of both.
Passing true. Okay, where's the detergent? Huh? Where's the detergent?
Why are you going through my stuff?
What?
Why are you going through my stuff?
What are you doing with a loaded gun in my house?
I wasn't thinking straight when I went back to school that afternoon.
You're proud of yourself.
Your fault I got caught.
My fault?
If I didn't have to hide who I was, I wouldn't have got caught.
Then who are you?
I'm in fucking hell. Living in the basement. I can't even stand up straight.
You end up just like your mama.
Redlining. Redlining is a discriminatory practice in which people are denied certain services like banking, housing, or insurance because of their race or ethnicity. Redlining is a real estate practice in which certain neighborhoods were designated as high risk largely due to racial demographics and loans on properties that were denied. To reduce lender risk, the practice institutionalized racial bias and limited home buying opportunities for black Americans. Even today, segregation persists in many areas and mortgage borrowers of color often get charged higher interest rates. This can be traced in part to redlining, a federal policy dating from the 1930s which made it more difficult for non-white buyers to purchase homes. Redlining, both as a term and a practice, originated with the Federal Homeowners Loan Corporation, a government agency created during the 1930s intended to aid homeowners who were in default on their mortgages and in foreclosure. HOLC created a system to assess the risk of lending money for mortgages within particular neighborhoods. Color-coded maps were created and used to decide whether properties in that area were good candidates for loans and investments. The colors indicated the lending risk level for properties. Areas outlined in red were regarded as hazardous or high risk, hence the term redlining. Redline areas typically had a high concentration of African American residents and other minorities, reinforcing segregation. Private mortgage lenders and even the Federal Housing Administration used these maps or developed similar ones to set loan criteria, with properties in redline areas paying higher interest rates or not qualifying at all. This practice was widespread and institutionalized, and it was used to discriminate against minorities and low-income communities.
There's a crazy wealth gap between white and black Americans that's tied to home ownership. White Americans hold 7 times the wealth of black Americans, the same ratio as in the civil rights era. And even though black people make up nearly 13% of the US population, they hold less than 3% of the nation's wealth. Now you have to understand that owning property is the major way American families build wealth. But when state-mandated discrimination stops black people from owning their homes, the growth of their wealth gets halted too.
Redlining is the illegal discriminatory practice in which mortgage lenders and insurance providers denied and restricted services based on race. Redlining practices included unfair and abusive loan terms for borrowers, outright deception, and penalties for prepaying loans.
So a few years back, West Compton, green as can be. But as you can see here, in less than a decade, the entire neighborhood's completely flipped. Red City. In fact, they had to build more housing just to accommodate all the Negroes who want to live there.
So, what are you prepared to do for us?
7% interest on loans for all properties Southland Trust Realty acquires.
And don't bend us over on the interest here. Not with all the business we're about to toss your way.
You guys are going to sell the houses for double what you paid and charge what? 20% on the mortgages? There's no way anyone can get out from under that.
If your bank wasn't legally prohibited from lending to Negroes, you do the same.
Chicago, Baltimore, Lansing,
Oakland, Seattle.
Move just one black family into a decent white neighborhood, and the other homeowners will throw money at you faster than you can count it. What happens once they realize they have been swindled? Well, you could always ask Miss Coyster if you could borrow a sanitary napkin.
If they make their mortgage payments, we win. If they default, we win.
Oppression, a social system in which certain groups have greater access to social, economic, political, and legal resources, rights, and power. Forms of oppression include racism, heterosexualism, sexism, ableism, and classism, among others. Oppression is expressed on the individual and interpersonal level in everyday acts as well as systematic, permeating all aspects of U.S. society. Oppression is the subjugation and the marginalization of specific groups of people within a country or society, such as women, people of color, religious communities, citizens in poverty, LGBT people, youth, and children. This socio-economic, cultural, political, legal, and social oppression can occur in every country, culture, and society. Oppression is a form of injustice that occurs when one social group is subordinate while another is privileged. Oppression is maintained by a variety of different mechanisms, including social norms, stereotypes, and institutional rules. Oppression occurs when a particular social group is unjustly subordinated, and where the subordination is not necessarily deliberate but instead results from a complex network of social restrictions ranging from laws and institutions to implicate biases and stereotypes. A common conception of social oppression is seen as when a single group in society unjustly takes advantage of and exercises power over another group using dominance and subordination. This then results in a socially supported mistreatment and exploitation of a group of individuals by those with relative power. In a social group setting, oppression may be based on many ideas such as poverty, gender, class, race, or other categories. It is difficult to construct a definition that applies to all forms of oppression. 5 characteristics or faces of oppression: exploitation, marginalization, powerlessness, culture, imperialism, and violence. Economic oppression is the divide between 2 classes of society. These were once determined by factors such as slavery, property rights, disenfranchisement, and forced displacement of livelihoods. Discrimination is not often visible to those who are not in the midst of it. Those who are oppressed rarely have access to resources that would allow them to escape their maltreatment. This can lead to internalized oppression, where subordinate groups essentially give up their fight to get access to equality and accept their fate as a non-dominant group.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Here's the thing about oppression. Those who are holding power and reinforce these oppressive structures, racism, sexism, homophobia, all the different isms and oppressions, those who are upholding it, guess what? They oppress themselves too. It's not just marginalized folks who suffer from oppressive systems. It's also those who are doing the oppressing, those who have privilege in a particular identity category. They oppress themselves too. And that's why this experience of fear, failure, and self-doubt that we know as imposter syndrome, it can happen to all groups.
So I'm taking a class on social justice, and we're learning about the definition of oppression and the different types of oppression. Oppression can be said to have two modalities: oppression by force and oppression by deprivation. Oppression by force is imposing something on a group that causes physical or psychological pain. Examples include sexual assault, kidnapping, and physical violence. Oppression by deprivation includes the act of depriving an individual or group of something they need for their physical and psychological well-being. Examples include neglecting job opportunities or educational experiences based off of their group membership or identity.
The oppressor has unfortunately won again. In case you missed it, Supreme Court, they overturned affirmative action. What does that mean? That means that colleges can no longer allow race or gender to play a role in admittance. Here is why that is a pivotal mistake. Well, number one, race has always played a factor in determining college admittance. What do I mean? College admittance is primarily based upon standardized testing. Well, standardized testing isn't actually a metric of intelligence. Standardized testing is a metric of resources. It's a metric of what caliber of education did you receive. Well, your education is based upon the public school system or private school system that you went to, primarily public school system. A public school system is based upon the resources of that public neighborhood. That public neighborhood is based upon redlining, and redlining has been based upon racism. Okay, let me give it to you in the inverse. If racism dictated redlining, who could live in what neighborhoods? Probably put the black people and the brown people over here. And redlining dictates who lives in a neighborhood. Who lives in a neighborhood dictates the resources of that school, and the resources of that school dictate how much help you can get for a standardized test, and a standardized test now dictates who gets into a university. Well, then racism was always in who gets into and who cannot get into universities.
Where the hell have you been? Everywhere I look, you're not where I need you to be.
To the bathroom, sir.
To the damn bathroom. For 40 minutes a day?
There's no bathroom for me here.
What do you mean there's no bathroom for you here?
There is no bathroom. There are no colored bathrooms in this building or any building outside the West Campus, which is half a mile away. I have to walk to Timbuktu just to relieve myself. Picture that, Mr. Harrison. My uniform, skirt below my knees, and a simple string of pearls. Well, I don't own pearls. Lord knows you don't pay colored enough to afford pearls. And I work like a dog, day and night, living off of coffee from a pot none of you want to touch.
Feminism, equality for all women politically, economically, and socially, regardless of their age, class, sexual orientation, or other characteristics. Recognition and critique of male supremacy combined with efforts to change it. Women have been seduced by feminism. As a result, women have come to believe women are good and men are bad, an equation that has destroyed the relationship between the sexes. This notion of women are good and men are bad has been the foundation of not feminists but of the anti-feminists since the 19th century. Feminism was supposed to soothe the savage beast as men were prone to bouts of rage, drunkenness, and other activities. If women didn't tame men, the anti-feminists argued all hell would break loose. In fact, feminism reversed the equation. It encouraged women to be bad girls, to seek their own pleasures, to go for it, to leave unhappy marriages, to control their own bodies, and it encouraged men to be good, demanded it. Feminism started out as a function that was for the empowerment of women. It has deteriorated into men versus women. Feminism today is nothing more than a female hate group. To a feminist, a victory is a victory. So much so that they have now disguised their functions as women functions instead of calling them feminist functions in an attempt to recruit. 3/4 of the homes in the black communities are broken homes. Young black men are brought up weak, ambitionless, and taught to fear everyone because they are raised by mothers who are convinced by these feminist types that they can do bad by themselves. The black gender war will determine who will lead the black race into the future. Our war efforts have shifted from the fight against racial injustice to a senseless battle between our own brothers and sisters with a goal of self-destruction.
Restoring healthy mindsets is my thing. And today I'm going to be talking about how high-value women don't buy into the modern-day feminism. Let me tell you what I mean. I am not talking about not investing in yourself. The modern-day feminism I'm talking about is the one that shoves down your throat that men are the cause and the root of all evil, that you should always be an independent woman and be happy alone. The modern-day feminism that doesn't encourage family.
A lot of women have started to wake up, and they are realizing that what third-wave feminism fed them and promised them isn't all it's cracked up to be. I mean, I cannot tell you how many videos come across my TikTok page, my X feed, all of it, that are just like this.
Man, I feel lied to by the culture. But I'm going to take full responsibility there, man. I fell for it. I fell for the boss bitch, the, like, I could do everything by myself, that hyper independent bullshit. And I'm 31 now, and I still don't have kids. I still don't have a family.
And so many women around her age are reevaluating their lives, reevaluating what the hell they were focused on for the last 10 or 15 years, and are realizing that they probably want to change everything. And
feminism isn't actually about equality. It's about equality when it benefits us. It's really about women wanting special privileges and treatment at the expense of men often. And I think it's alive and well, sadly. I think life is easier if you're a girl, actually.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of benefits that men don't have. Have no barriers today.
That ignores a lot that I'm a woman with a disability, so there's a lot stopping me that you don't have to think about.
Well, I'm talking about as a woman.
There are the barriers, right, that we constantly ignore that are very much systemic.
You said that there's, like, barriers. I want to know what barriers in the U.S. today as a woman.
Well, as a woman or as a woman of color?
My friends, in spite of His Majesty's government, I am here tonight. For 50 years, we have labored peacefully to secure the vote for women. We've been ridiculed, battered, and ignored. Now we have realized that deeds and sacrifice must be the order of the day. We are fighting for a time in which every little girl born into the world will have an equal chance with her brothers. Never underestimate the power we women have. We do not want to be lawbreakers. We want to be lawmakers. Be militant, each of you in your own way. Those of you who can break windows, break them. We have been left with no alternative but to defy this government.
The red pill. Learn the fundamental principles of becoming a true alpha male and discover the hidden secrets to finally understanding women and what they want and how to give it to them. The term red pill comes from the 1999 film The Matrix, has become a framework for individuals to describe their awakening, which caused the upbringing of male supremacist movements. Men's rights activists, the red pill. The red pill terminology grew in male supremacist groups and was adopted more broadly by far-right and white supremacist groups to describe their own versions of awakenings. The red pill ideology is a wide range of concepts and ideas that promote male supremacy and aims to free men from a society considered genocentric. It draws selectively on popularized forms of evolutionary psychology and claims that sexual difference is essential and natural. The underlying premise is that evolution has formed gender relations so that men and women have developed divergent reproductive strategies and mating strategies, an assumption used to present a sexual hierarchy where women are hypergamous and only desire the most attractive men or the ones with the highest social status. Hypergamy has been argued to have been exacerbated by the rise of feminism, the decline of marriage, the liberation of women, the sexual revolution, and online dating. This is considered to have benefited a small group of successful men, the alpha males. In the red pill logic, a person has a sexual market value based on income, image, and social status, while promoting a competitive dating pool where heterosexual men fiercely compete against each other on the sexual market. Red pillers also show resentment towards women and their rights. The red pill ideology is therefore an illustrative example. The misogyny paradox, where boys and men's desires for girls and women is expressed within a broader culture that encourages them to also hate girls and women. The red pill ideology generally depicts women as controlling, manipulative, and treacherous for withholding sex from men, demanding resources, and giving little back. On the other hand, men are regarded as rational, honorable, and victims of forces beyond their control.
This incoming clip will show you exactly what's wrong with the red pill ideology.
Men love women under far less conditions than women love men.
That sounds like the opposite of love to me. Well, if you love under far less conditions, that sounds like desperation. Like, oh, you might step out and f another bitch or whatever. It's like, okay, well, how much do you actually love your woman really to do something like that? Like,
that has nothing to do with how much you love the person.
It absolutely does.
Why?
Because it requires you to step out of your own selfish frame of reference to see how your partner feels about something. If you only prioritize the things that you want in life, that says something about how you view love of another person.
The people who believe this red pill way of thinking claim to be so logical and grounded in reality, but really they're logical to a fault, which ungrounds them from reality. They're so scared of coming off as emotional or even considering emotions because that's for women, so they lean too heavily on this biased form of logic that ultimately favors men and disadvantages women. That's why they rationalize and even praise male cheating and promiscuity, but then condemn and demonize female promiscuity.
Look, fellas, a lot of y'all be watching Red Pill, and man, it's just blowing up right now. All these incels that get on these podcasts and bash women and say all this. Y'all are listening to the wrong advice. You listening to people who genuinely could never get a woman to save their lives, and they're mad about it, and they're shaming them because of their nature.
Tell y'all why most red pill advice is terrible for you. It does not help you when it comes to actually having a relationship. You're a good guy. You want a relationship. Like most of the people watching this video, I know you want a relationship. You're not out here trying to just sleep with a bunch of girls, and good on you. That's not a good thing in my opinion, and you should not be doing that. Most of the red pill advice I see online kind of revolves around acting like you don't actually like the girl, right? Like, oh, remain aloof and don't really give her too much time and attention. Don't text her back too fast. Don't say I like you. And a lot of it is good practical advice, and a lot of it has a lot of good undertones. But at the same time, it only works when you're talking about attracting a girl. When you're talking about the first talking stages, when you're texting her or going on dates with her for a couple weeks or a month or two, that's when it works. But once you actually get into a relationship, what are you gonna do?
If you guys keep listening to the red pill community and this bullshit manosphere, you will never get women. They are making you bitter towards women, hateful, disrespectful towards women. How do you expect to get any women if you preach hate towards women? Understanding female nature is one thing, fellas. I agree. You have to understand the psychology of female nature. But if you don't have the game to back that up with experiences, with knowledge that you know when it comes to women, with your failures, your successes, that red pill, the female nature bullshit, it ain't gonna mean nothing.
Sherry, quite contrary. Kiss my ass, it's really airy.
Oh, real funny guy.
What are you doing in the pit?
Filling in for Glory while she's out?
Just in time to use the new porta Jane?
Oh.
Sherry!
Hey, cut it out! Cut it out! Knock it off!
Let her out, that's enough!
Self-hate, hatred directed towards oneself rather than towards others. Blacks face numerous obstacles to achieving high levels of psychological well-being because of their minority status in the operation of racial stratification systems in the United States. Early investigations of the significance of race to blacks sought to explain how the wretched conditions of their lives and stigmatized status negatively influenced their sense of psychological well-being. Blacks were assumed to have damaged self-concepts because of the unfair and demeaning conditions of their day-to-day existence. It was theorized that social discrimination and negative reflected appraisals caused all blacks to hate themselves and their racial group. Within it, they kick off a study of black self-hatred hypothesis. Individual variation and internalization of positive or negative racial stereotypes was associated with low levels of self-esteem in a national probability sample of 2,000 self-identified black adults interviewed face-to-face in 1980. Rejection of positive stereotypes and acceptance of negative stereotypes was statistically linked to declining levels of self-esteem. Background variables include gender, region, education, age, income, marital status, and skin color. Weak evidence was found to suggest that the relationship between negative stereotype acceptance and self-esteem depended upon how close respondents felt towards other blacks. Across many African American communities in the U.S., depression and anxiety have been on the rise, creating a ripple effect on mental health. Racial trauma is caused in several ways, including repeated experiences of racism and microaggression and transgenerational trauma due to historical oppression.
Being born black is the worst thing that's ever happened to me, and I really think it's ruined my life. When I look at black people, I honestly see like ugliness. I see a wide nose, big lips. I just do not like my race. Growing up was very hard for me because I didn't really identify with the black people in my community. But then on the other hand, the white people couldn't really identify with me, so I didn't really fit in anywhere.
A black person raised in the West is to know you were raised in a system under past and active white supremacy, anti-blackness, and racism. So it is understandable that there are some people who would internalize that anti-blackness. Then you add misogynoir into the mix as well as colorism, and we get this comment, which I think is absolutely spot on. To unpack the impacts and effects of white supremacy, anti-blackness, misogynoir, colorism, it is active daily work that can be tiring, and some people do not want to do that work. Some people are completely fine with colorism so long as it benefits them. And then you still have people who are very mentally colonized with that sense of internalized anti-Blackness and are ashamed of their own Blackness, ashamed of their African features, their dark skin, their monoracial features, any feature that is associated with Blackness.
I actually believe that I hated myself for a decade or more. I heard that language in my head for a really long time, like, oh, I hate myself, I hate myself. And it was always predicated on metrics and judgments about whether I was behind or ahead of someone else. It actually kept me from really knowing myself because I only knew myself through metrics. I was either this size or had this much amount of money, or I had this type of experiences. Like, everything was being measured.
The symptoms that I see in many people who have difficulty to treat borderline personality disorder is this intense self-loathing and self-hatred. Belief that no one could possibly love them. And I remember having a group once with kids who really liked each other, all of whom believed they could not be loved. So I said, well, how can this very interesting paradox exist? It's so entrenched that they can't even label it as a thought or as an experience. It's not, I think that I am unlovable, I am a hateful person, in the same sense that they would say, I am a woman. So it is fused with their identity, and it's much more difficult to treat.
The other thing about depression is it kind of collapses time. Suddenly, you find your whole days blending together to create one endless and suffocating loop. So you find yourself trying to remember the things that made you happy, but slowly, your brain begins to erase every memory that ever brought you joy. And eventually, all you can think about is how life has always been this way, and will only continue to be this way.
The war on drugs. The war on drugs is the policy of a global campaign led by the United States federal government of drug prohibition, military aid, and military intervention, with the aim of reducing the illegal drug trade in the United States. President Nixon launched the war on drugs campaign in the 1970s, and his legacy still exists today. The campaign attempted to bring attention and awareness to the impact drugs have had on the American people. Nixon's signing of the Controlled Substance Act in 1970 has helped officials classify and regulate dangerous drugs. Nixon criminalized drugs like marijuana, heroin, and crack cocaine. Nixon's harsh punishment for drugs crippled the black community in the 70s and created stereotypes and harsh jail sentences for black people. The 1986 Anti-Drug Abuse Act created a 100-to-1 disparity between the amount of crack cocaine that triggers a federal mandatory minimum sentence versus powder cocaine. This means 5 grams of crack equated to a 5-year sentence, or 500 grams of powder cocaine will give you the same sentence. In 2019, officials noticed 81% of convicted crack offenders were black. Many believe it is because of powder cocaine was associated with white populations, where crack cocaine was with the black population. The war on drugs campaign has not done much over the years for the American people, for black people as well as those in the Latin community. Black people make up 43% and white people make up 55% of people convicted of drug felonies in state court. Black people account for 53.5% and white people account for 33.3% of people admitted to state prisons for new convictions for drug offenses. The result has left many barred from a wide range of employment, educational, social security, and other benefits. An estimated 1/3 of black male Americans will spend time in state or federal prison at some point in their lifetime, more than double the rate from the 1970s and over 5 times higher than the rate for white males. What's driving the imprisonment of black men? Arrest data shows a striking trend. Arrests of black men have fallen for violent and property crimes but soared for drug-related crimes. As of 2011, drug crimes comprised 14% of all arrests in the miscellaneous category that includes drug paraphernalia. Possession comprised an additional 31% of all arrests. Just 6% and 14% of arrests were for violent and property crimes. Black people arrested for drug offenses has ranged from 23% in 1980 to 41% in 1991. Blacks remain far more likely than whites to be arrested for selling drugs.
And now hacking into the system.
1986 was the year where we really started seeing African Americans going to jail in numbers that made zero sense. They called it the war on drugs. And in the war on drugs, the idea behind it was wonderful. We want to get rid of cocaine. We want to eliminate the usage. The idea is amazing. It was how they decided to do it that I have a problem with. So here's what would happen. They actually built 2 different laws and they passed them. The first law was representing crack cocaine compared to powder cocaine. One was in a solid form, one was in a powder. What you typically found was the solid form was in the minority communities. The powder was typically in the Caucasian communities. So what they did was they passed this law and they said, if you have crack cocaine, the solid version, you need 5 grams for an automatic minimum sentence. Powder cocaine, you need 500 grams. But one form of this, 5 grams is gonna send you away. The other one, you need 100 times as much of the same product for you to get the same sentence.
Never forget that Richard Nixon's aide said this.
The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had 2 enemies, the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about drugs? Of course we did.
And because of that, every 25 seconds, someone in America is arrested for drug possession. And 1/5 of the incarcerated population is serving time for drug charges. Another 1.15 million people are on probation and parole for drug-related offenses. Black Americans are 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana charges than their white peers. Black Americans make up nearly 30% of all drug-related arrests, despite accounting for only about 13% of all substance users. Black Americans are nearly 6 times more likely to be incarcerated for drug-related offenses than their white counterparts, despite equal substance usage rates. Almost 80% of people serving time for a federal drug offense are black or Latino.
Okay, today we're going to be talking about the war on drugs, which is really the war on minorities, especially black people. And let's check it out. Nixon declared the war on drugs. Prison population went from 300,000 to 2.3 million. Half of those people were incarcerated for drug offenses and 2/3 of them were minorities. Between the 80s and 2011, arrests of African Americans fell but rose dramatically for drug offenses. They put in black people in jail for drugs, and peep it. They made crack possession and selling way more of a crime than coke possession and selling, because they found that in the minority neighborhoods, people are selling crack more and the richer people are buying coke. Come on, like black people selling crack, white people buying coke. Check it. You can pause this and read it. Private companies spend $35 billion a year on prisons. Think of how much they're making, man.
Since when did you shave?
Since now.
You ain't got no hair.
Yeah.
Get on the ground! Get down!
Yo, come on! Fuck!
Okay!
You think you want to go get caught? Look at me. 8 kilos.
Get your fucking head down!
8 kilos. The court will come to order. Has the jury reached a verdict?
Yes, we have, Your Honor.
Please hand it to my bailiff. Will the defendant please rise?
The people of the state of Michigan find the defendant, Richard Worshey Jr., guilty of possession with the intent to distribute greater than 650 grams of a controlled substance, carries a mandatory sentence of life without the possibility of parole.
What is wrong with you people?
Guilty.
Juror number 2.
You
know what you just did? You took a life.
Imprisonment, confinement, incarceration, keeping in prison. Imprisonment has had a disproportionate impact on black communities in the United States, affecting individuals, families, and society. People who have been incarcerated face discrimination in hiring, lower wages, and weaker social networks. They may also have difficulty obtaining basic necessities like housing, education, and employment. Black and Latino Americans are less likely than white people of the same socioeconomic group to see their earnings recover after incarceration, which can trap them in low-wage jobs. Incarceration can also negatively impact the lives of children of incarcerated parents. Incarceration can also impact the families and communities of those who are incarcerated. For example, more than 1 in 6 black men who should be between the ages of 25 and 54 are absent from daily life due to incarceration and early deaths. High levels of incarceration in communities can lead to higher crime rates and neighborhood deterioration, which can fuel greater disparities. Black Americans are incarcerated in state prisons at nearly 5 times the rate of white Americans. Nationally, 1 in 81 black adults in the U.S. is serving time in state prison. Wisconsin leads the nation in black imprisonment rates. In 12 states, more than half the prison population is black: Alabama, Delaware, Georgia, Illinois, Louisiana, Maryland, Michigan, Mississippi, New Jersey, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. 7 states maintain a black-white disparity larger than 9-to-1: California, Connecticut, Iowa, Maine, Minnesota, New Jersey, and Wisconsin. Latino individuals are incarcerated in state prisons at a rate that is 1.3 times the incarceration rate of whites. Between 1980 and 2015, the number of people incarcerated increased from roughly 500,000 to 2.2 million. 32% of the U.S. population is represented by African Americans and Hispanics, compared to 56% of the U.S. incarceration population being represented by African Americans and Hispanics. In 2014, African Americans made up 2.3 million, or 34% of the total 6.8 million correctional population. Nationwide, African American children represent 32% of children who are arrested, 42% of children who are detained, and 52% of children whose cases are judicially weighed to criminal court. In 2012 alone, the United States spent nearly $81 billion on corrections. Spending on prisons and jails has increased at triple the rate of spending on pre-K through 12 public education in the last 30 years.
This is just your daily reminder for Black History Month that in the U.S., we over-incarcerate disproportionately black individuals compared to white at a disgustingly high rate. This chart behind me represents every single state. Keep in mind they all have their own independent Department of Corrections, and the national average is we incarcerate black individuals 6 times as much as we incarcerate whites. So that means for every 1 white individual that's incarcerated, we're incarcerating 6 black individuals. Some of the states are up to 12 times higher.
Just a few prison system facts for the systematic racism does not exist crowd. We have over 2 million people in our nation's prisons, which is a 500% increase over a 40-year period. That's almost a quarter of the world's prison population. The only 2 countries that are even close in terms of incarcerations per 100,000 are El Salvador and Rwanda. In 1980, about 40,000 people were incarcerated for drug offenses. By 2019, that number increased to about 430,000. In 1986, the average drug sentence was 22 months. By 2004, that rose to 62 months. The system costs the American taxpayer $80 billion a year. 1 in 3 black men end up in prison, as opposed to 1 in 17 white men. There are 1 million arrests per year for drug possession.
The 13th Amendment outlawed slavery by the individual, but then it inlawed slavery by the state. And it validated reincarceration through mass incarceration. So what they did was they said, okay, we got 4 million blacks who are about to be free. 4 million. Jobless. We freed them, but we gave them no opportunity, which means they still dependent on us to just transform the system. So, and we're not going to give them a job. That means these black men and women have to do what? They have to break the law to feed their family. So what they did to create this mass incarceration system, which was designed to do what? Remove blacks from the functioning society. Get them out the way so they don't threaten anything we're trying to do.
But over the last few years, there has come into being another kind of political prisoner. And I'm talking about all of the sisters and brothers who are victims of the system, who are easy targets of the police, who get railroaded through the courts into prison, often for no reason at all. Who are there only because they're black. And I think a brother during the Attica Rebellion sort of expressed this whole thing when he was asked by a reporter what he was charged with. And he said he was charged with being black. That's why he was there.
Please! Stop right there! Don't resist!
Let's get an army of blue up in Harlem. You go into those projects and you stop every little thug you see.
Oh.
Corey's mama. Corey, can you hear me? It's mama.
Yeah, mama. What's up?
Somebody loves you.
What?
Somebody loves you, baby. You getting out.
Mama, wait, slow down. What are you talking about?
Corey, listen to me. The man who did it, the man who actually did it, confessed. He confessed. Oh, I've been praying for this day. You free. You coming home.
Gun violence. 327 people are shot in the United States every day with an average of 117 deaths. Black homicide rates are 7 to 8 times those of whites, though blacks have a rate of poverty only 4 to 5 times that of whites. Today, homicide is the leading cause of death among young black men and contributes significantly to the shortened lifespan of the black male. In about 80 to 90% of the cases, the black victim was killed by another black, and about 52% of the murder victims were acquainted with their assailant. Projected self-hatred makes blind rage and gives the perpetrator of the violent attack a sense of legitimacy and justification. Blacks have been indoctrinated by a criminal justice system which places higher value on the white life than on the black one. The black community in particular is in dire need of homicide prevention centers with programs of prevention, research, and treatment. In 2019, the adults arrested for murder, 51.3% were black, 45.7% were white, 3.0% were other races. Black people in the United States are living in a gun violence epidemic. Each day, on average, 30 black Americans are killed by guns and more than 110 experience non-fatal injuries. Black Americans experience 10 times the gun homicides of white Americans. Black Americans are nearly 3 times more likely to be shot and killed by police as white Americans. Black Americans experience 18 times the gun assault injuries of white Americans. 68% of black Americans or someone they care for has experienced gun violence. This disparity is the result of centuries of oppression and disinvestments. Gun homicides, assaults, and police shootings all occur at disproportionate rates in historically underfunded communities.
Since the COVID-19 crisis began in 2020, homicides and gun violence have spiked in cities from Atlanta to Washington, D.C. to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And those homicides and gun violence usually happen in underserved black communities. It's gotten so bad that some officials are calling it a public health emergency. But there's evidence that it could be an educational problem as well. That's because a new study shows black children between the ages of 17 and younger are 6 times more likely to die from gun violence than white children, and are much more highly likely to either witness a shooting or survive one.
In 2022, black children and teens were 20 times as likely to die by guns compared to white counterparts, and for the first time on record, the gun suicide rate among black children and teens surpassed the rate amongst white children and teens. These stats show exactly how I see gun violence, through my age and through the color of my skin.
4 Harvard students held at gunpoint by Harvard University police a couple nights ago. Tragic. What's most tragic is gun violence survivors like myself have to relive these traumatic experiences, and then we gotta go to class. And then we gotta still submit the assignments on time. And we gotta still do midterms, do finals. And we gotta still answer all the questions in black studies or whatever, about black people, about these things as we watch them happen, not only to each other, but to ourselves. Something I've been bringing up in course is that this is an experiment. We're testing black people on a daily basis. How much can you take? How much can you handle? And all people, how much can you take? How much can you handle to see when we gonna break?
All right. Wednesday night practice.
Thanks for the uniform, Coach. Thanks,
All right.
Coach.
Hey, kid, you can't come in there right now.
How long it's gonna be?
No.
Why can't we go in right now? We're waiting to catch somebody inside. What we gonna do? Come on.
What?
Shit, come on!
Move!
What? They'll pass by.
Come here! Oh, no!
It's alright. We're okay. Gee, we're okay. Gee, come on. We'll just wait for somebody to come. It'll be okay.
Black people in America today are hope fatigued, and what that means is, after slavery was quote-unquote abolished, for at least a century, black people tried to build a black America that was for us and by us. But the supremacists, you know, that don't sit too well with them. So, over the course of history, repeatedly, they came in, burned everything down, killed the men, raped the women, tossed the babies in the fire, all because we was trying to build equal to what they've already made us build for them. Mind you that at this point in time in history, we had no gun rights. We were barely fighting to even be considered human. So black people got tired of trying. We got tired of trying to build black America because it was expected, and we were comfortable with the fact that the supremacists was gonna come in and destroy it because they can't control it. The problem I'm having is we are right now in the most opportune time to build a black America. We have the most advantages today. We have the most rights today. We have the gun rights to protect ourselves. We have everything today that our ancestors did not have to protect themselves. You want to stop history from repeating itself?
It be your own kind. It be your own kind that get away with murder. It be your own kind that you have to deal with. It be your own kind that you gotta really watch out for and watch your back. It be your own people, your own kind. And we talk about racism so much, but we gotta deal with our own kind. We kill each other. We rob each other. We steal from each other. We throw each other under the bus. We talk about each other, but we talk about racism.
Black men, because we are the most oppressed, we're the most traumatized. But you know what else? Because of our definitions of masculinity, which says a man can't be vulnerable to get help, we're the least likely to go get some damn help. Fact. Black men are in pain, but we cover it up with the exterior. But when we get behind the privacy of our door in our home, we let all that pain out on the only person who loves us unconditionally, and that's the woman. You see, I always tell people this. If you don't like you, why are you expecting him to like you? Why are you looking for a relationship if you ain't got one with yourself first? You don't like yourself. Why are you shopping for? If you don't like yourself, right, why would anybody else like you? Hey, you don't even like you, and I'm supposed to spend the rest of my life with you? That's insane.
This is what it's like being a woman of color in America. You're black? Well, you don't look very black. God, you don't sound black. You sound like a white girl. You're like an Oreo, black on the outside, white on the inside. Oh my God, is that your real hair? Oh my God, you are the whitest black girl I know. Oh my God. Do you have a weave? You're black, but you don't have a black person nose. Like a whitewashed black person. Oh, you went to private Christian school in West Virginia in the South? You're that type of black girl. You do ballet? Oh, I didn't know that black people did ballet. Are those extensions, or does your hair actually grow that much? Oh my God, can I touch your hair? You don't have black people lips. You would be the type of black girl to date a white guy. And closing out with my all-time favorite. You're so white.
Do you live here? Do you live here? Absolutely. Get your ass away from my car. You Karen. Get away from my car.
White people in North America live in a society that is deeply separate and unequal by race, and white people are the beneficiaries of that separation and inequality. As a result, we are insulated from racial stress at the same time that we come to feel entitled to and deserving of our advantage. Given how seldom we experience racial discomfort in a society we dominate, we haven't had to build our racial stamina. Socialized into a deeply internalized sense of superiority that we either are unaware of or can never admit to ourselves, we become highly fragile in conversations about race. We consider a challenge to our racial worldviews as a challenge to our very identities as good, moral people. Thus, we perceive any attempt to connect us to the system of racism as an unsettling and unfair moral offense. The smallest amount of racial stress is intolerable. The mere suggestion that being white has meaning often triggers a range of defensive responses. And these include emotions such as anger, fear, and guilt, and behaviors such as argumentation, silence, and withdrawal from the stress-inducing situation. These responses work to reinstate white equilibrium as they repel the challenge, return our racial comfort, and maintain our dominance within the racial hierarchy.